Thank you for tuning in to another Monday night live stream hosted on NFFC. I'm joined again today with Dan Hindery. Dan, this is kind of our redemption draft, right? We did one a little over a month ago, and in that draft, neither of us wanted Joe Mixon, but he just kept falling and falling and falling, and like there was some bad juju there, but we got him rounds below ADP, and then like a couple of days later, the news came out about his foot injury. So I don't want to say it's dead in the water. Maybe Mixon can come back late in the season and be that hammer for us, but definitely happy to get another go around on this NFFC tournament. And you've been doing a lot of work studying the ADP and the trends throughout these drafts. So really excited to have you on as you can provide some extra insight where a lot of us are just drafting the players that we like.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I think we did get a little behind the eight ball there. So I feel like we kind of boxed ourselves into kind of having to take Mixon there. So hopefully we can get at least one or two running backs early to maybe soften that desire where we feel like in the fifth, sixth, we have to reach. Although I do feel a lot better about some of those mid-round running backs today than I did when we drafted a few weeks ago. So the nice thing is that even if we do kind of go a little bit wide receiver, tight end heavy early, there are more running backs in that kind of what I was viewing as the dead zone.
Yeah.
I feel like some of those situations have cleared up a little bit, and there's some nice sleepers who've emerged who I think are going to kind of go in that round 7 to 10 range. So even if we do get a little desperate at running back, I feel like there's more options that I feel good about this time around.
That's exactly how I feel too, and I gotta say, man, like I've done a handful of these now with different guests. I've done some on my own, obviously out on other platforms doing drafts as well. And there is like a pocket that I really like in rounds 5, 6, 7. I feel like you can get some really good wide receivers there. Obviously, I'm liking late round quarterback this year, as we've discussed quite a bit. But I don't know if there's a wrong way to start the draft this year. Like I've started some drafts running back, running back, running back. I've started others running back, tight end. I've started others wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver. And it feels like there are just so many pockets throughout the draft where you can attack different positions that, you just kind of, it sounds very cliche, but you want to take the value early and let that kind of dictate your strategy in the middle rounds.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like in the 5th and 6th round, especially, is when you can um, draft a little bit for need, but know that
Mhm.
there's going to be good players at every position there. So that does give you kind of like a backstop where if you kind of go heavy one way the first 3 or 4 rounds, you can just make it up in the 5th and 6th with some really strong players through there.
And drafting early, it's a blessing and a curse. On one hand, you're getting some really good values. Those guys that we were getting in rounds 19 and 20 now might be getting moved up in rounds 14, 15, and 16. On the other hand, you get a handful of potentially dead picks, guys that you were wish casting earlier in the offseason. So the extra information that we're getting is great because it helps us make some better picks, but it also at the same time dulls some of the edges that we would have thought that we had. So
Yep.
here we are looking at the top of this draft. Nothing too crazy here, kind of what we had expected. You and I did intentionally want to pick from the end of the draft. Feels like you could just walk away with two really good players at that 1-2 turn and then still come back to the top of round 3 before a tier fall off. So we're going to be picking 11 here to start this draft. We got Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Justin Jefferson, Saquon Barkley, Ashton Jeanty, Amon-Ra St. Brown. There's a name. There he is, Christian McCaffrey, that
Yeah.
I was kind of shocked not to see go off the board yet. But we got Justin Jefferson back at camp today. So we had seen him fall into like 108, 109. Now he's back where I think he should be as a top 5 pick, but McCaffrey sliding quite a bit. There's we kind of talked pre-draft about some players that we wanted to target here. Malik Neighbors was not on my radar. I didn't expect to see him still here at 9, but is that a guy that or at 11? But if Malik Neighbors falls to us, is that a pick you'd want to make, or is the guy that we talked about pre-show you think the better pick?
I go back and forth because those would be my 2 guys here. The guy we talked about, Neighbors. I'm a little bit worried about the kind of the foot injury,
Yeah,
but
and they're saying a back now too. Like I
yeah,
saw
he's got a
two
back and he had
injuries.
hurt his shoulder.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, I like both.
Luckily,
They
we
kind
don't
of
have to
solved
make
it
the
for us.
choice. Yeah, they
Yeah.
did it for us here. So this pick that we're going to make, it might come off as a reach to some people, but this is something you and I talked about pre-show. I want to make sure we're aligned here. Drake London is the
Yep.
pick, right? Yeah,
Yeah, I
and
like
he's a
that.
guy I have moved him way up my draft board. You don't want to read too much into like joint practices and camp training or target shares or anything like that. But this guy, like every single week, they're saying that he is just the focus of the offensive attack. They're saying like a 40% target share in these joint practices. And you just look at it, really quiet offseason for Kyle Pitts. Let's talk about that a little more after we make this next pick. I think we know who we're going with here as well. Chase Brown, I think, is a pick you want to make, or
Yeah,
with Derrick Henry falling, do you think maybe that's a better pick?
I like Chase Brown just because I think he's a little bit safer in some ways because I think he has a higher reception floor.
I agree.
Where I think Henry, I mean, he's going to get a ton of yards and touchdowns, but I personally project Brown for like 60 more catches, something in that range, 55, 60 more catches. So I like that. And then in terms of one of the things I've spent a lot of time on with the NFFC is just looking through the ADP. And we have a little time to kind of talk through. So like
Yeah.
London at 12 or London at 11, his ADP is up to 12 and a half and like 12th in kind of rank order. So, you'll occasionally see some of these drafts, but not in these higher stakes ones. You'll occasionally see him fall to 18 or 20 in some of these other drafts, but that's rarely happening in this tournament. And so I think he's one of those guys who I think there's a lot of guys in the kind of a similar tier there and just kind of get your guy. I mean, I would have been fine with Neighbors, London, Thomas, or Collins. And that was one of the reasons I really like kind of drafting at the turn is you're going to get one of those really talented young wide receivers there.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement with you here. And Drake London, I talked about this earlier on the show with Alfredo Brown today. We were just kind of talking through. I can't even remember the topic of the show. We've been doing so many shows lately, but we were just talking about training camp, and when we got to the Atlanta Falcons, we were talking about how he has just been the focus of practice every single day. And I said, like, it's not crazy to think that he could be the wide receiver one this year. Of course, there's really tough competition up top with Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb, but it wouldn't surprise me one bit if, like, going into next year, this is still a very young player. I don't think we've seen the best of him. 29% target share as a rookie. Now we look at the quarterback who perfectly matches up with his skill set. Wouldn't surprise me one bit if going into next year, we're looking at Drake London in that same tier with Chase and Jefferson and Lamb and Malik Neighbors is just a can't miss wide receiver.
Yeah, and you don't want to read too much into small sample sizes, but he had that almost 40% target share in the final 3 games with Michael Penix as the starter last year. So that kind of adds some credence to some of these training camp reports and some of the practice breakdowns and the joint practices and stuff where he's still getting 35, 40% of the targets from Penix. So it's not, you're just kind of stacking these little pieces of evidence up and trying to do your best to draw some conclusions from them.
Yeah. And I think another big thing with London.
Okay.
Yeah. Real quick. I just love the play style of Michael Penix. Like, he will let his guys make balls on contested target or make plays on contested targets. And that, like, London isn't the best separator, but he is really good at coming down with contested targets. And Penix is going to afford him a lot of those opportunities. So I think it's just a great quarterback wide receiver pairing here. But yeah, coming up here in just a couple of picks, Ladd McConkey, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, all guys that we were kind of hoping would make it to us at the top of round 3. Trey McBride also off the board, and there goes Garrett Wilson. So still some decent players to pick from here. JSN jumps out to me as one. T. Higgins is another. I feel like we did kind of miss the running back cliff a little bit. We'll come back to running backs probably in round 4 or 5. Outside of Higgins, JSN, is there anybody that jumps out to you here?
No, those were the 2. I slightly prefer Higgins, but if you prefer JSN, I'm good either way.
I do prefer JSN, and if you'll just
let's
allow me, I've done a lot of these, and just the way it's worked out, I haven't gotten JSN in any of these drafts yet. My whole thing with JSN, I mean, they could run the ball a lot, and I think that's obviously the big fear, but this offensive line was like the number one concern that everybody had. And of course there are some weak links there, but they looked a little bit better in the preseason than I'd expected. Gray Zabel just immediately coming in there. And something else I didn't really think of, which I wish I had thought of earlier, is even if the offensive line does struggle, this is a Kubiak offense. They're going to have extra tight ends out there. They drafted Robbie Oots, who's going to be playing fullback. So even if there are some weaknesses in the offensive line, this is a team that's going to be pulling extra blockers. And there isn't a whole lot of target competition behind JSN. Obviously, Cooper Kupp is there, but he's getting a little bit older. We're hearing this drumbeat about Torrey Horton. But I just think that JSN, this is a guy we were talking about as a top 10 pick when he was coming into the draft, slid a little bit, then dealt with the injuries. But we saw it over the second half of the season that when he does take over, he can be a bona fide wide receiver 1.
Right. And Hampton was another guy who was on my short list. I know. You thought it was like a little rich, and I get that. I think he's fine in this early range here too, and along with Higgins. Those are kind of the 3 guys. I think what's interesting is we were picking 26th, and the top 25 guys in ADP were off the board for our pick. So it wasn't, you kind of sit there hoping like somebody slides to you, and in some of these drafts that happens. This one just went almost just straight down the board in terms of ADP, which is not ideal because I feel like the ADP in the first couple rounds feels pretty sharp, especially in terms of like maybe not the exact order, but the exact players. I thought,
Yeah.
especially those guys who in the top 24. I think I'm a little bit out on Garrett Wilson, but other than that, those top 24 guys are just like my top 24, and you hope one of them gets there to 26. But
yeah, and it is really just kind of a pick your route after that point. Garrett Wilson, I don't know what to make of Garrett Wilson. I mean, obviously we know he's talented. We know Justin Fields really likes to hyper target his wide receiver one, but I don't really know what to make of him. I do have Jackson Smith-Njigba and T. Higgins, who we talked about. I have both of them. I had Garrett Wilson in my rankings. We'll see how this one shakes out, but something that we did talk about pre-show is at the 4-5 turn, we're still expecting some pretty good running back value. I will say this draft room so far has been pretty sharp, not letting much slip past where they should. Seems like it's been a lot of good picks so far, so we'll see if we can get some of those running back targets here. But I don't want to say that there's like a favorite way to draft, but I do like 2 running backs and a wide receiver, or 2 wide receivers and a running back in the first 3 rounds. That just lends a little bit of balance, and then it helps you kind of shape those other picks. So we've got just enough balance through 3 rounds that I'm feeling okay about this team so far. Back to the Omari and Hampton thing, though. I don't know if you listen, Matt Waldman, he shared this with us in base camp, but then he talked about it in his podcast as well, that he has a ophthalmologist in his family who kind of talked about what he expects this injury to be. And it sounds like there's for Najee Harris, of course, it sounds like there's a pretty straightforward protocol for getting back out there. But if you try to rush that at all, it could cause extra problems. So they're saying with this injury happening on 4th of July, I've heard a lot of people speculate that he could be back as soon as week 1, and that like not seeing him out there is just part of his recovery, but that once he's a full go, he's going to be a full go. It's just right now he has to avoid blows to the head. He has to avoid extortion and things like that. So I think Hampton, really got steamed up. This is a guy we were looking at in round 5. Najee Harris getting injured, of course, pushed him way up draft boards. But if we're looking at Najee coming back early in the season, a couple of weeks of a ramp up and conditioning, we might see that split that we had expected earlier in the preseason happening, just a few weeks into the year. So that's what gives me a little bit of pause on Hampton, but maybe I'm overreacting to that.
I think my view on that is I think we get like kind of anchored to these early ADPs. I don't think he ever should have been a 5th rounder. And I was never as worried about Harris as Waldman, some of those guys were. So in my opinion, I think he was one of those guys who was likely to rise no matter what. The closer we got to the season and people start getting excited about, and especially like, there are some like things from camp where, like Khalil Mack's just like, you've been in the game as long as I have, when a guy is a guy, you know what I mean? And he said that about Hampton.
Yeah.
He said that about Hampton. So there's some of that stuff out there that makes me kind of feel like I'm not really sweating Najee Harris. My kind of baseline with Harris is I'm expecting him to end up on PUP and be back in like week 5 or so. And I'm sure that he's going to get some carries, and again, maybe this is one of my blind spots, but in general, I like to bet against these veteran running backs who signed contracts for like $2 or $3 million. Like it just, people worry about it and they think the guy's going to be blocked, but when it comes like push to shove, like teams investing a 1st round pick in a running back want that guy to be the guy. And, it's only when, he shows up and he's not really what they thought, that's when you kind of get into some of these situations, kind of like the Rashad Penny one was one that kind of comes to mind where, I think Seattle drafted him with thought like this is going to be the guy. And then he got there and he really wasn't. And I'm not really getting those same early vibes from Hampton, that like everything out of camp that year with Penny was just like, he's not as good as Chris Carson. So this is kind of, you kind of knew that like you could start backing off and have some like, okay, this can be a split or maybe even Carson. I'm not really getting those vibes out of the Chargers. But again, I do think, if you are taking him at the top of the 3rd round, that's a really high opportunity cost. So I still like him in that range, but he's not necessarily like top of my list there. But I think he belongs in the top 30.
And then, of course, there's been a lot of ado made about Greg Roman and his history with running backs that, like, combined running backs have never been top 20 in rushing. But I think a big part of that also has to do with the fact that he had prime Lamar Jackson for a big chunk of his
Yeah.
OC career, where, yeah, of course, running backs aren't going to be scoring as much when you've got Lamar Jackson taking a big piece of that rushing pie. You'd imagine that with Justin Herbert there, a big gap between Omari and Hampton and the rest of the room, I could see him pulling away and changing tendencies a little bit, but we'll see how that one shakes out. Um, Looking at the guys that are going off the board here, we do have some guys in RQ that I would be very happy with these next picks coming up here. I see you've thrown some names in there as well, and yeah, we're just a few picks out. RQ is filled, and I think this is another reason that I like drafting late in round 1 and 2. Not only are you able to usually, I mean, in our case, we might not have gotten the tier that we wanted with the early round 3 pick, but I feel like there's just so much value still to be had at that 4 or 5 turn.
Yeah, and I do think that JSN is a little, at least for me, a tier ahead of some of those other guys in the late third. So I do think we still got a benefit there.
Devontae Adams going off the board, that one hurts. Definitely would have liked him. Our Jeff Bell has been paying close attention to the Rams beat, and it sounds like Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua should be a lot tighter in ADP than they are. Of course, the concern with Devontae Adams is his age, but a lot of beat reporters saying that he should be the target earner and the target leader on that Rams team as opposed to Puka Nacua. So a good pick there by Team 9. One pick away here, and we've got quite a few guys. I see you have shuffled around some of the order
Yeah, I don't know
in
if you
our
agree with
queue.
that.
I
Or,
do, yeah. And this was a
yeah,
player, one pick away from a guy that we said we thought we'd have no chance of getting in round 4. We thought he'd be gone, before round 3 was over, and we got him.
there it is.
This is who we want, right? Travion
Yeah, I
Henderson.
like that pick. Let's do
Yeah.
Travion here. I think,
I feel like
again, in
this
a
does make
full
not getting
PPR.
Omari and Hampton feel a little bit
Yeah,
better when you're able to get Henderson in the very next
exactly.
round.
That is very true. And then I guess our question, we can wait until these next. We have 3 guys in our queue.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm happy with any of these 3. Oh, Kamara was atop the queue. Definitely would have liked him, but I
Yep.
am so in on Jameson Williams.
Yep.
This is a guy that I've got
That's
inside my top 20. I think this is a relatively easy pick here. This is a guy that I've been taking as early as round 4. Had Henderson not been there, probably would have gone Kamara, but had Kamara not been there, I'd have been okay taking Jameson Williams as early as 411. But luckily
yeah,
we were able to wait
absolutely.
to get him around the turn there.
Yep. And there was the other guy who was in our queue, Calvin Ridley. I'm also very high on him, but I do have Jameson just slightly ahead. Better quarterback play, and maybe just a little bit younger, which always is a
Yeah,
good tiebreaker.
and I mean, like
But yeah,
we've
those
been
guys
talking
are
about
great
this
options
being
there.
a sharp room from Devontae Adams all the way around to Calvin Ridley. Didn't have
Mhm.
DK Metcalf in the queue, but that was just our queue getting emptied out right there. I mean,
Yep.
almost in exact order
Yeah,
as
and
well.
taken.
So
Yep.
a really sharp room here, but still feeling good about these first 5 picks. I do like, if I had to pick between 3 wide receivers and 2 running backs, or 3 running backs and 2 wide receivers, I do prefer having 3 wide receivers, especially in a full PPR league. So Drake London, Chase Brown, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Travion Henderson, and Jameson Williams. I've started probably more than one team this offseason with that exact same top 5, and
Yeah.
I feel good about it.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think nice mix of, it's actually a pretty young team, which is nice. We have a lot of guys who are, our whole team's 25 or younger, so that's kind of nice.
Yeah, when Drake London's holding it down as the old man on the team at 24
Yeah,
years old, I think he's
exactly.
still 24, yeah, but came into the league really, really young. Um, but yeah, no notes on this one. This is exactly how I'd want to start it off. So at this point, I think the one thing that we did really well in our first draft was we drafted a lot of guys that had really good stacking options with quarterbacks.
Mhm.
Not crazy about Michael Penix, not crazy about Sam Darnold, and to be honest, not really crazy about Jared Goff either. So, I mean, are those any guys that you'd be looking at potential stack options later, or are you
I
okay
actually
not?
am. I'm actually pretty high on golf in this format. I wrote an article actually today about the Football Guys Bowl and noted that the highest scoring quarterback last year in the fantasy playoffs was Jared Goff.
Mhm.
And part of that is because both in the Football Guys Bowl and in the NFFC, you get 6 points per passing touchdown, and it's 0.05 for passing yards too. So it's a really big boost to the pocket passers. It kind of levels the field between the pocket guys and the guys with rushing upside. So I do think it's enough to kind of change strategy a little bit where you don't necessarily have to chase like the Justin Fields, Drake May types as much. You can kind of go with the guys like Goff who project for 4,500 yards and 30 plus passing touchdowns.
Yeah, that's a good point. Do you have any concerns about the Lions maybe cooling off a little bit? Obviously, we know like over the second half of the season, red hot. Well, not even the second half of the season. It was more just like the last month of the season they were red hot. Do you have any concerns about Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, Rantuan Andolel? They've lost a lot of pieces, or do you think that they have the infrastructure in place where they can just kind of keep doing the same thing that they've been doing for the last few years without those guys?
I'm a little bit worried.
Yeah.
I mean, just I think there's always a good chance of regression when a team is just so far ahead of the pack. Where I think the Lions averaged like 33 points per game last year, so I do think there's going to be some regression. It just kind of comes down to how manageable that is. Sorry, I'm adding guys to the queue here while I'm
I know I'm
talking.
I'm doing the same. I know, like, as you're talking, I'm, like, half listening and adding guys in the queue and vice versa. These are always
I
fun,
was
doing the live
Yeah, I
streams,
will say,
but
one of the things I've noticed, I feel like the 7th round has gotten a lot harder. That is one of the areas where, a lot of the guys we were targeting and getting, earlier 3 weeks ago, a month ago,
Tony Pollard, the guy
are
who just
now
went off the board.
exactly, one of those guys who is moving up, and I think everybody's kinda on a lot of these same guys based on camp reports, and then you have some guys who've fallen off, like Mixon, for example, who, um was kind of in this mix and no longer is. So I'm looking at my list over here.
Ricky Pearsall was the guy that I just added to the queue, would have loved him, but that's another guy that, like, wasn't too long ago that Juwan Jennings was going, like, 2, 3 rounds ahead of Ricky Pearsall, and now Ricky Pearsall, top of the 6 is kinda where he goes in almost every single draft, it seems like nowadays.
Yeah, I
So,
have his ADP at 61 now. So yeah, he's moved from he was going in the 80s for a long time, and now he's all the way up to 61, which is tough.
and that's what we talked about at the top of the show is that, like, on one end, you get more information, so you're not burning some of those final round picks on guys that might not even make the team. But then on the other end, like all of these guys that are going right now, Ricky Pearsall, Emeka Egbuka were guys that we were getting much, much later. DeAndre Swift, another one. And these guys where it felt like you were getting these great values in rounds 8, 9, 10. Now it feels like that edge has very much so been dulled. DeAndre Swift was just like an auto click for me when he was going in round
Yeah.
7, but now we see people paying up for him as we're getting. I wonder how much I am interested of the people overreact as much as they say they're not going to. Interested to see where the Bears players start going off the board in this draft. We already saw DJ Moore go about where he typically will at the top of round 4, but that offense looked good last year. But I think last night. But I think what
Mhm.
people aren't really paying attention to that I've been
You
reading
guys
in
are
the
doing
beat
safe.
is that there isn't Dunze going a little bit earlier than expected too, but, I think they're gonna spread the ball around a lot. Like, it's not just going to be like it was in Detroit over the last couple of years where the entire offense through the air kind of flows through Amon-Ra St. Brown. It sounds like there's gonna be a mix of everybody involved in this offense, 2 tight ends, 4 wide receivers, DeAndre Swift coming out of the backfield. So it makes me a little less excited to invest in this offense because I don't think they're going to have this offensive focal point like we've been hoping for.
Yeah, it's one of those I think I mentioned to you. It's like I'm scared to pass on some of these guys because there is real upside there. But I'm
Hmm.
also pretty scared to draft some of these guys too because you just don't know who's going to emerge, especially after they use their first 2 picks in the draft on skill position guys who I think we all think are really talented. So, if it was just Morno, Dunze, and Swift, you'd feel really good. But then you add, you know, Loveland, you add Burden to the mix. It gets crowded and it makes it a little bit harder to select some of those guys.
So we're coming up in a few
Okay,
picks here,
4
and
picks away.
yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of players that I like in this section of the draft. Caleb Johnson, kind of surprised to see him going as early. Well, I guess that's probably below ADP, right? I imagine his ADP had settled in and about round 5 or so, but we've gotten some
Actually,
not
he's
so
he's
great
down to
reports.
he's down to 77 in our so I feel actually really good about this guy at the top of the queue. He's a guy you've been on
Running
for a
back?
while.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, we
This
can talk about we're on the clock. We can
Yeah,
talk
we're on
about
the clock. Isaiah Pacheco? Yeah.
yeah, Isaiah Pacheco. He was a guy who I was kind of lukewarm at best on for most of the offseason. And then there's just number one, he's supposedly looked really good in camp, and there just hasn't been any positive news on the backup running backs at all. It's like Rashard Smith's playing wide receiver mainly, and you're getting a guy who's a third rounder last year. So I don't know how you feel about these guys here.
I like both of the wide receivers a lot. Jacoby Myers and Matthew Golden. I'd be happy with either of those. I'm trying to think. We've got a lot of upside.
The safe
Although I
pick
do
would be
like the other
Myers.
option. It sets us up for a nice little super stack. I'll let you make the final decision on this one.
Oh man,
I bullied you into JSN, so this choice is all you. I like all three of these guys in the queue. I have
yeah, I
no
did. I
qualms with any
know.
of them.
So you know what? I think it's between Golden. Let's go Golden here.
That's what
I
I like.
do.
That would have been my number one choice.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think
We can
the
talk about
ceiling there is just so high.
we can talk about the other two. We had Jacoby Myers and Sam Laporta in the queue also. I think Laporta is a really nice pick. He's a guy who I wasn't drafting a ton of, but now that he's fallen to kind of 75, 80, I really
The
like
injury
him in
doesn't
this
scare you off
range.
at all?
Not too much. It sounds pretty minor, but
Yeah. I don't know.
just a
Maybe
little
it's
bit of
me.
time with the minor injury. But
I
yeah,
got
no, I
I
do
got
think
burned
it
big time last year drafting injured
undrafted
players.
injured guys.
Yeah, so maybe I'm just overcorrecting now, but yeah, I feel like Jacoby Myers was also a good pick. He's one of those guys that like I can look at it and I see the value, and I've got him in my rankings a few spots ahead of ADP. But it's just such a boring pick. Like I don't know what else to
Yeah,
say other
yeah.
than like you're drafting him as a wide receiver 3, and he's probably going to be a wide receiver 3.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, to me, I think when I was thinking through the options, it's just a little bit worried about Pete Carroll offense. Somebody said
Mhm.
Pete Carroll offenses have never had a 100-yard receiver, which you think about some of the talent and the guys they've had there. That's one of those where, like, if he gets 90 catches for 1,000 yards or something, it's a great season, but you're not necessarily going to win 250,000 with that. And maybe he's a little better than that. I could actually see him putting up pretty similar numbers to Brock Bowers. That wouldn't shock me.
Right.
But I'm a little worried about both those guys just in terms of the absolute ceiling. But at least with Bowers, you're getting the big positional advantage.
Yeah, and I'm so bullish on Matthew Golden. I mean, what was big for me is that like within the first week of camp, he had already entrenched himself in 2 wide receiver sets, and that's something we know isn't easy to do. Like Jaden Reed, like anybody who's been drafting Jaden Reed over the years knows how hard it is to do that. And it sounds like it's just going to be Romeo Doubs playing X, and then we've got Matthew Golden opposite him outside. Jaden Reed will obviously come in the slot, but I'm just very bullish on the Packers as a whole. Sounds like Jordan Love is having an amazing camp. I think early in the offseason, I kind of wrote off how bad that injury was and just saw this regression from the Packers as a whole and just kind of thought that's who they were. And then the more I, listen to podcasts or, read reports on the Packers, it sounds like last year that injury really, really impacted Jordan Love pretty heavily. So I think with him back and healthy, we could see a much, much better team. And there's always that joke that like the Packers just have all these wide receiver twos. I think Golden does have the chops that he can kind of step up, separate himself from the pack, and give us a nice season there. So I like that pick a lot. But all 4 of these receivers that we had, I mean, going with Drake London, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Jamison Williams, Matthew Golden, these are all guys that, in my opinion, have top 5 potential.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think one of the things that stood out to me on Golden, there's a report where I believe it was the general manager said he has some of the best hands he's ever seen. And the Packers wide receivers had just terrible drop rates across the board. And I think part of why they went so, run heavy was not just the Love injury, but it's like they didn't totally trust those guys to actually catch the ball in big spots. And that included Reed, who I think had almost a 10% drop rate. So I think he's going to be kind of like the safe guy and also the field stretching big play guy. So you're getting a little bit of best of both worlds. And again, that is a pick where we are swinging for upside a little bit, but he's not going to have to be in our starting lineup day one if we have those top 6 picks because, this is a fairly shallow starting lineup. So, once you have your top 3 running backs, your top three wide receivers, you really can start focusing more on trying to hit some home runs versus, like in basketball or if there was a league where you could start 5 wide receivers, maybe you do kind of lean a little bit more heavily towards the safe guys.
Yeah, the Jacoby Myers, like we talked about. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah,
I think this is
exactly. It was like
we're
the personification of that.
right. And this, we're putting Matthew Golden the way our lineup would be set right now. He would be on our bench. So yeah, the hope is that, he can develop into a player that it would probably take an injury or bye weeks for Matthew Golden to jump ahead. But, funky things happen. And even Jamison Williams, a guy who's getting a lot of steam right now, he paid up for with an early round 5 pick. But there's a lot of wish casting there. Like we're hoping Jamison Williams can maintain his efficiency from last year and grow his target share a little bit, and that this offense can stay as good as it was last year. But the reality is there is risk in Jamison Williams as well. So wouldn't surprise me too much if come week 3 or week 4 we say, hey, Jamison Williams didn't hit the way that we had hoped. Matthew Golden's out here tearing it up, and we're going to put him in the flex spot instead. So that's kind of the nice thing. Clayton Gray actually, we did the mock draft for our magazine, and I loved the team that Clayton Gray drafted. And I can't remember all the players off the top of my head, but I was asking questions about all of these teams. And what I asked him was, you swung for upside with every single one of your picks and you attack these ambiguous situations. Is that a testament to your confidence in predicting how things are going to happen? And he said, no, not at all. But if you just play it safe, that's how you finish in 5th, 6th place. That's not what I'm trying to do. And the reality is I don't have to be right 100% of the time. I don't even have to be right 70% of the time. If 50 to 60% of these picks hit, I'm winning this league. And I think that's just such a good mindset to go into drafts with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you want to have multiple paths to success. So if you are taking some swings, you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you have to hit on every single one of them. If you're kind of doubling up and getting multiple guys with upside, you like you said, you don't have to bat 1,000. You can maybe bat 500 and still be in a great spot.
Exactly. Yeah. So really like some of the names that you have thrown in the queue here, frothing at the bit to make this next pick because there's a couple of guys in here that I really want to talk about right now. Sam Laporta did go off the board just after our pick. Nothing too crazy here. We are starting to see Khalil Shakir sneak back up a little bit. It's kind of funny, he picked up that ankle injury and really plummeted down draft boards, and we have gotten no news since. But he's starting to just creep back up, where I think people are realizing, like, even if he misses a handful of weeks, still Khalil Shakir, he was the wide receiver 1 last year, left some meat on the bone, and we can still, see him outperform that. Joe Mixon going off the board right here, which looking at that one, team 5, really attacking a lot of guys that would be considered dead zone running backs maybe, but I think that's the way to do it, is you just draft 4 straight and you only really need 2 to pan out.
You need to hit 2 to hit.
Tyrone Tracy going off the board there. I think that is a good value pick as well. I want to look at some of the available running backs here because a few guys still piquing my interest, but we've already got 3 strong running backs in Chase Brown, Travion Henderson, and Isaiah Pacheco. I always say if there's one position that I'm content to be weak at, it's running back, because I can figure that out on the waiver wire or in the late round picks. And I'm sure that, having seen how you draft, Dan, I know you like saving a lot of those late round picks for those injury away high upside guys as well.
Yeah, somewhat. I do think the closer we get to this season, I was kind of doing like the barbell approach, where it's just like get the running backs early and then wait until the last round. But now that we're starting to see those guys who were last round, they're starting to separate, and some are rising and some are falling. So it does make me a little bit more interested in trying to get a little bit more running back depth in the mid rounds. So this one is a tough one.
Some fun names to talk about here. J.K. Dobbins going off the board.
I feel like the first name. I feel like the first name. Yeah. So I think the first name is safe, and I think has more upside than maybe people think, because
0 targets in that preseason game. That doesn't concern you at all? You think that was just a little bit of a fluke?
Not really, because what we can say is T.J. Hockenson. I think.
I like both of the running backs there. How about we take one of those running backs, because we've got a couple of tight ends in the queue. So if we get sniped on Hockenson, there's other guys. Which of these running backs do you prefer? Because I love both of these names.
Let's go the one that's slightly lower, because I did see
Corey Krosky-Merritt.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Why not? Yeah, we're gonna draft some Bill here. I saw Jacob Sanderson, a buddy of mine. I'm sure you've seen him out in the Twitter streets. He just shared a screenshot where he went in round 6 in an NFFC draft that he was doing. Wow. So really getting steamed up there. And then we see Brian Robinson going off the board with the very next pick. Quinton was another guy that we had in our queue. And we could still sit back here and get TJ Hockenson, which I'm okay with.
Yeah, that's the good call on that. So yeah, with regard to Hawkinson, I've seen some reports from like Vikings camp that say that McCarthy's like in comparison to Darnold, the downfield stuff might not be as good. Like he might not hit as many deep balls to like Addison and Jefferson,
Hmm.
but the like intermediate and like over the middle stuff he's really good at. And again, part of it might have been scheme, but at Michigan, he was a guy who just loved throwing to his tight ends, and some of that was because he had Loveland and some
Colson
of those
Loveland,
guys.
yeah.
But I mean, part of that is talent, but also like that's kind of his thing. So I'm not worried about one preseason game. I think we forget too that Hawkinson was not 100% last year. You know, he came back in like week 6 or 7.
I want you. This is
Um,
the royal we. This is. I've been saying this a lot this offseason. Yeah, is that this guy? He was
yeah,
a
yeah,
top 3 tight end every single year,
yep.
and then blows his ACL out, has one down year, and everybody just kind of forgets about it.
And his first year in that offense, I think he was on pace for something like 110 catches. So, um,
And that was
yeah,
it. We saw
I
a
like
big
it.
change in usage when he was at Detroit. They were kind of trying to rely on his athleticism and they were using him as a downfield guy. And then ever since he showed up in Minnesota, midway point through that 2022 season, they just drastically changed his usage. And they said, hey, you're just going to sit in the flat and Justin Jefferson is going to clear out the defense vertically. And you're just going to sit here wide open and catch 90 balls a year. And then he
Yeah.
hurt himself. But yeah, it seemed like that trade to Minnesota really unlocked him as a guy that we were talking about, in the Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews tier just a couple of years ago. And yeah, I think that the injury really caused me. Yeah, I'm looking right now. This is insane. When he joined Minnesota midseason, first game, 9 targets, 10 targets, 9, 6, 6, 8, 9, 16, 12 at the end of the season. I mean, you talk about the pace that he was on. I'm looking 17 game pace, 161 targets in that
Yeah.
2022 season over the second half of that year.
And then in 2023 had 95 catches in like 14 and a half games. So, I mean,
Yeah.
he was on pace for like 110 or so before he got injured. And then last year, I take those numbers with a grain of salt because again, he missed the first 6 or 7 games and was kind of working his way back into shape too with that ACL because it was a like a December, I think it was like a right around Christmas that he tore his ACL the year before. So
Mhm.
it wasn't one of those where he had a full year. It was he came back in like 9-10 months. So
Yeah.
and then
And,
I do think
and still relatively young too. Just turned 28 years old, which,
yep,
if we're talking in running back years, that's way over the hill. But this is typically when we see tight ends hitting their prime. Anybody
yeah,
who's done studies on age curves before, it's like age 28, 29, 30 are typically when we get the best years from tight ends. So we already saw him, before that age apex performing like a top tight end. And yeah, I think it could absolutely happen here. I do, I was kind of a little tongue in cheek with the 0 targets in the preseason game. But ever since that preseason game, I've seen him falling well below ADP.
right, yeah. All right, yeah, and then we did have like a kind of tight end run because some of the guys, in ADP, like Colston Loveland had been at 125, which would have been like early 11th round, and he went almost 2 rounds earlier after that preseason game, which didn't surprise me.
I mean, he
Um,
looked good. He looks like
so
an NFL
yeah, yeah,
ready tight end already. Like he looked
yeah.
really
So
good.
part of my thinking when I looked at I sent you the Google sheet with ADP. I like to kind of put in what my picks and start kind of highlighting some guys who I think are interesting at those picks. One of the things I noticed was that if we didn't get Kittle at the 4-5 turn, that the question would kind of be, do we take one of our top tight ends there in the 8th, 9th, or do we just sit there and like cross our fingers that we don't get like left out of this big tight end run that in almost all these drafts is happening in like this 8th, 9th round.
Yeah, and that was a good call
Um,
by you because Laporta almost made it back to us. Like we almost took Laporta over Isaiah Pacheco, and then he made it all the way back.
no, he
3 picks.
he only went 3 picks after us.
Am I? Oh, I'm reading that the wrong way. Yeah, my
Yeah,
bad. I
yeah.
was
He
looking at the
went
board
so yeah,
backwards.
it went Golden, Diggs, Myers, Laporta. So basically
But
our queue. And honestly, I had Diggs as my next guy behind Laporta too. So it's like again, this thing's going pretty close to both the board and how I would have it ranked.
And silly me, I was looking at us taking Hawkins in there, and I was like, if we can pair him up with Colson Loveland with our next pick, we've got our safe and our ceiling option, but
Yeah.
no chance here. Warren, Loveland, all of the tight ends that we like. There's still one tight end available that we like sitting on there. I'll throw him in the queue. I don't know how
Yeah.
much you want to reach for a tight end too, but still
I'm
some
okay
guys
with
out
it
there.
just because I think we're getting to a part of the draft where, we could, if we want to go on stacked, I don't know if we start looking at this or a lot of my targets have kind of already gone. Let
Hmm.
me see a few of the
You're saying quarterback targets?
no, just targets in general. I feel like a lot of the guys, like Shaheed and Mooney, were two guys who I'd
Yep.
hoped.
Which Mooney, I got to
Um,
say too, they released DJ Chark today, which
yeah,
I don't know how much you want to read into that, but that probably tells me that Mooney's injury isn't as serious as they had initially hoped because he was
yeah, and
signed
there
like the
was a
day
report
after
that
he got
came out.
injured.
Yeah, there's a report that came out today that said something. He's kind of like on track, on target, something along those lines. I
Yeah.
do have one
So
guy. Let me see
even
if
if
I
he
can.
misses one or two, I mean, drafting him as like a wide receiver 4 or 5, that's a great spot to get him, knowing that he'll probably be back and up to 100% by week 3, 4, 5.
Yeah,
But yeah, it is crazy how much of this changed. I mean, this was like a pocket of the draft that I was loving not too long ago, and how quickly it dries up these days. It felt like you were still able to get some really good wide receivers here not too long ago, and now, I mean, I don't know how far you have to look down the draft board to find guys that are appealing, but not
yeah,
nearly as nice as it was.
yeah. I'm trying to kind of go through my list here and see who's still available, and it's
Christian Kirk was sitting atop our list. That's a good one. He was a player that I wasn't drafting a ton of just because, I get rookie fever too. And Jaden Higgins
yeah,
got really excited about him. And like even thinking like maybe Jalen Noel can edge out Christian Kirk. But reports on Kirk are just that he has just been ripping it up, that he has looked great throughout camp, nicknaming him the slot demon. Definitely don't want to ignore a nickname like that on a new team. Starting to see these quarterbacks go off the board pretty quickly here. Um, I don't know how long you want to wait on quarterback, but I just find myself continuing to wait because there's just so much value that you can be had.
I don't mind taking two quarterbacks
Right.
though too. So if we want,
Absolutely.
I'm okay with that. I kind of like if we want to take a shot on a guy. Um, this is a guy who I have my eye on. I know we are somewhat deep at this position already.
A trade could really make this one look good,
Yeah.
which might be happening here. Yeah, let's wait until this next pick comes in. Oh, we're already on the
No, we're
clock,
up.
right?
We're up.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and take Braylon Allen here. I think the big thing for me with Braylon Allen is how young he is. Like everybody was excited about Braylon Allen last year, just 21 years old. And like if you look at him this year compared to last year, it looks like he's put on like 10, 15 pounds of muscle, like still a young guy coming into his own. I think the ceiling with him is so high. And then what there's two guys that I really like the two guys atop the queue. I'll let you take the choice here. Um, I don't know. Keenan Allen might be a sucker's pick, but I just can't stop looking at what he did. Almost 1,300 yards in this offense just 2 years ago. But I also really like the tight end that we've got sitting in the queue here as well if we want to back up.
Your call. I'm good with either.
My call.
I'm gonna let you. Yeah, I'm gonna make you make this call. Or do we want to go quarterback? Are we worried about a run here, or are there just too many that you care?
I think we could do okay with waiting on quarterback and probably double
Okay.
tapping quarterback with our next two picks. I'm gonna go with Tucker Craft here.
Okay.
I do like Keenan Allen, but it's just this is going to be a dumb reason, Dan. It's so hard for me to click the button on Keenan Allen in the 10th and 11th round when I was just
Okay.
consistently
You're
getting him in
just
like
getting
around
so used
16
to
or
getting.
17.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it seems like why would I pay up for this guy when I was able to get him for so cheap? I mean, there was a point in time where I had Keenan Allen on over 50% of my rosters because it was just, a free ticket at the end of your draft. And there, when you're getting him in round 17, it's like all upside. Let's do this. There's a little bit more of an expectation when you draft him in round 11. And I
Right.
think maybe
Yeah, I agree.
maybe I'm doing some mental gymnastics to talk myself out of that one. But Tucker Craft is a guy that I actually have him ranked one spot below TJ Hawkinson. So really, really tight
Yeah.
in my rankings. Just a beast after the catch. So I like that. And then, I mean, hopefully we don't get completely gutted on a quarterback run here, but I'm still seeing like 7
There's
quarterbacks
so
that I'd be
many.
happy
There's
with.
so many
Right.
that you can't be too. I'm not
Right.
super worried about it. We
And that's
have
kind of where I'm at. Like, and it's like in
these
best ball,
people who
different.
have. I mean, there's a guy. I mean, the Lamar Jackson guy already has a backup. Like
Yeah. And I feel like you
there's
can
eight
even
of them,
wait
10 of them left.
longer in this format because now with people kind of getting privy to how deep quarterback is in a lot of best ball drafts, you're seeing people starting to reach for three quarterbacks, which means the quarterback well is kind of dried up by like round 13, 14. Here in a managed league, people are willing to kick that QB2 further down the board. So, I mean, this is one where you could just keep waiting and waiting and waiting. The best ball mind makes you want to pay up for that QB1 a little bit. Not even paying up for the QB1, but like I feel like almost every best ball draft that I'm doing, I'm just taking like three quarterbacks between rounds 10 and 15. And here you could wait even longer because you can't start two
Yeah.
quarterbacks. So
Right.
I think we're pretty good. We got a bunch of guys in the queue right now. Some of them
Yeah,
even
I threw
stacking
some in there.
options. Yeah, that we
Yeah.
could. I'm not. I mean, there could be a huge run right here, but I've done a handful of these drafts, and a quarterback
I doubt
run
it.
isn't typically
The
something you see.
Yeah, and I think when it does start, it's more like 13th, 14th round. So I think we're fine there. I'm not, like you said, even, I mean, you mentioned not really liking Penix as a stocking option, but I'm actually pretty high on Penix, and especially in a format like this that
I was gonna say
rewards
when
passing
you
yards and touchdowns.
yeah, and
I'm
again,
kind of
that's
okay with them too. So
6-point passing touchdowns and what you said about the yardage, that does make
yeah,
Penix a little bit more appealing here. Um, is there anybody else in this Falcons offense outside of Drake London? I mean, we talked about Mooney a little bit. Jeff Bell has been, covering the Falcons as well. And it is like shocking how little news there is on Kyle Pitts. He's been dealing with a little bit of an injury here, but he's a guy that I've moved so far down my rankings at this point. See the youth and you see the rookie season production and all these other things, but I'm checking right now. I think he's fallen. Yeah, he's outside of my top 50. Oh my god, he's outside of my top 20 at this point. Like he's just a guy that I have not been drafting. I've got Chigakonkwo and Hunter Henry and Zach Ertz ahead of Kyle Pitts in my
right.
rankings now.
Yeah, I moved him up a little bit, but it's a sad, like somewhat like the idea. But yeah, I have not been drafting him hardly at all. The one guy who I do kind of like in like the 20th round, and part of it is because I've been drafting Penix more than most quarterbacks, is Ray McLeod.
Oh yeah,
I actually think he's pretty interesting, and especially in these like cumulative scoring leagues where you're going to need those like 12, 15 points certain weeks. And he's a
right.
guy who had 66 catches last season. Um, he got a bunch of like designated carries too. So we had like almost 100 rushing yards. So he's just like a really solid guy. And then he also a little bit of added upside with, some questions around Mooney too. So
Right.
one of the things I have been doing is I've been taking advantage of the discount on Mooney, who, depending on the site, is now starting to fall to like kind of 115, 120. And you can kind of double tap, just get Mooney in the, whatever that is, the 10th round, and then come back and get McLeod in like the 18th round. And you're kind of covered either way. Because I think if Mooney misses some games early in the year, McLeod would probably be the number 2 over Washington. And
There was like
so I
a
think
little.
it gives you a little bit of a fallback in case there is something more like not nefarious, but something they're not telling us about Mooney.
Yeah. And I think there was a drumbeat about Washington, but that was just kind of like Washington is on the field now that Darnell Mooney's out there. But yeah, it sounds like Ray McLeod has been the clear number 2 while Darnell Mooney has been out there. So, don't want to mix up reports that we're hearing. It does sound like he is still the
Yeah, I
guy.
mean, I think it's so like the 3 starters when everybody's healthy should be London, Mooney, and McLeod, and then I
Right.
think Washington's the 4th guy who's in there for Mooney. So I'm not sure Washington's quite draftable, but yet, unless we get some like kind of really depressing news on Mooney, which would suck because he's like
Right.
one of those guys I've got a ton of shares of.
Yeah.
Um,
I'd pulled off a little bit after the injury, but then his ADP
yeah,
fell
too.
so far that I was like, I'm back in and I've still been
Yeah,
drafting him. Yeah.
yeah.
But we
So
were concerned
okay.
about a quarterback run. That's definitely not happening. We've only seen one go off
Yeah,
the
I
board
think
so
we're
far. We'll see
fine.
if this changes in 12, but feeling pretty good about the quarterbacks we've got in our queue. And this is the
Probably
game that I
start
play
putting some
so
other
often
guys
in
in.
these NFFC drafts is, I throw like 8 quarterbacks in the queue and then it gets up to my pick and I'm just like, I might take another running back and just keep kicking
Yeah.
quarterback down the board. What do you take on the Jalen Wright pick there? He's a guy I was expecting to see fall a little bit. Sounds like Ollie Gordon has kind of jumped ahead of him, but also that could be total overreaction to a single preseason game.
Yeah, that's one that I want to look into a little more because I do think that there is some smoke there in terms of Achan losing the goal line work. So one of
Mhm.
those guys, if one of those guys is like emerges as the goal line back, there is 10 touchdown upside. Maybe not a whole lot of yards, assuming Achane stays healthy, but it's also one of those offenses where I'm just not drafting many Miami guys. There's not the reports on the offensive line. They have a bunch of young guys they're counting on, and it hasn't been great. And just like the overall vibes aren't great. So, I'm not sure totally what to make of it, but it's one of those where like if I miss out on, the Miami guys, I'm kind of okay with it.
It was weird too because 2 years ago they had one of the league's best offensive lines, and then just kind of blew it up.
Yeah.
Let some guys walk in free agency. A guy retired on
Teron
him, and
Armstead
all of a sudden,
retired. Yeah.
yeah, and that's huge. Losing him, but then also letting Robert Hunt walk in free agency, and like how quickly they went from like just this dominant offensive line that was just imposing their will on every team they played against to Tua Tagovailoa taking every snap out of the shotgun and trying to get the ball out of his hand in 1.2 seconds. Like just a very different look offense. That being said, Ollie Gordon. Jeff Bell and I talk about this all the time, like how much you have to change those final round targets because the guys that you're in on end up creeping up the board. Like, it used to just be Taj Brooks and Kyle Monungai in rounds 19 and 20 and not thinking twice about it. Those guys are moving way up now. So now Ollie Gordon is one of those guys that I see drafted in the late rounds. Torrey Horton was another like favorite round 20 target. Now he's going in round 15, round 16. So you have to constantly be like reevaluating those late round picks, finding new guys you could sprinkle in. I don't want to throw all the names out there right now, but a handful of guys that we have been discussing on our training camp podcast over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, exactly. What a move. I don't have a real strong here with some of. I mean, we can probably talk about. I think we probably want to get at least one quarterback here. We don't necessarily need to do two.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the question would be like, do we want to stack versus just taking? I think my favorite guy is not a stack guy, so I don't know.
Yeah, and that's where I'm torn right now. The guy that's sitting atop the queue right now for us, I definitely have ranked a tier ahead.
Okay.
That being said,
and he's the highest in kind of the ADP here also. So I think the other guys, I like the idea of trying to grab two.
I would, if we can get both guys atop our queue, and you got to realize the guy drafted in 12th just took Nix and Murray with his last 2 picks, so I doubt he's in the quarterback market.
So we don't need to.
So I'm thinking we can get both of the quarterbacks that we want here. But one. Well, let's wait 2 more picks. Don't want to say the names out here. And it seems like anytime you mention a guy's name, he immediately goes off the board. See, Najee Harris fallen to 12. I feel like that's just an overcorrection at that point. Even if he misses the first 2 or 3 weeks, takes a little bit of time to get ramped up here. Najee Harris, I think he's still going to be involved. He's a guy that I don't want to draft, but it just seems like we pushed so far down draft boards that I'm willing to sprinkle him in 11th, 12th round and, goes off the pick right before us here. Interested to see what Team 10 does here because they've got every box checked already. They got a elite quarterback, elite tight end, very flush wide receiver and running back room, so they can kind of go any way they want here. Would be interested.
I bet they go wide out with only 4, but I could be wrong.
They also they might take our quarterback here. We'll see after the pick that they made in round 3. We'll see how that one shakes out. Just a few seconds left here, and then Kyle Pitts goes off the board, a guy that was not on our radar. So Justin Herbert's the pick here.
Yeah, I like Herbert there.
Yeah,
and then let's talk through like, do we want?
Oh, I didn't even realize we got sniped on Jordan Love.
Yeah, Jordan Love went ahead.
I didn't even.
So there's the other quarterback there, or there's the other position if we want to push quarterback another round for backup quarterback. This guy has been getting some pretty good camp reports, so I don't know if we want him as
a wide receiver.
Wide receiver 5, yeah.
Yeah, let's go with Rashad Bateman here.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of where I was leaning to, just because there's plenty of quarterbacks left if we need a backup, and I think Herbert. One of the nice things about him, he just feels pretty safe too. So it's not like you're taking a huge risk there. And
I think something that's
and there have been
go ahead.
So I was gonna say I've been doing the Baltimore camp reports, and there has been some like real buzz on Bateman, just catching some long touchdowns, passes, and he's been kind of the go-to deep threat. And he just signed a pretty healthy extension in June. I think
3 years, like $39 million, I think, right?
Yes, yeah, I think it was. Yeah, exactly. I think it was. Like
and they
13.
gave him an extension last year. They gave him like
he had just gotten one, and he got another. He got a raise.
He had a big
after.
breakout. Yeah. So one of those. I think people have just written him off as a bust, and I think that's what it is. I'll quiz you.
And
real
he's
quick.
one of those guys who you're not necessarily excited about, but we're gonna need bye week stuff he's just a really solid guy you can throw in there if you got a couple guys on by or whatever.
Still just 25 years old
I
too,
like that pick.
and
Yep.
he got
And
40.
ascending player, that is
Yeah,
another. They've used that term in Harbaugh's talked about. He's still a young ascending player, which, like you said, he's kind of like Drake London, where he came into the league super young,
yep.
and
And
he's been kind of
Alfredo
banged
Brown.
up.
Yeah, we just talked about him on the show earlier today. Missed 5 games as a rookie, missed 9 games in year 2, missed 1 game in 2023, but you could tell there was still some lingering effects from the injuries this season before. And then last year he seemed to put it all together, has himself a big breakout year, almost 800 yards, 9 touchdowns. And
Yep.
this is again, I keep referencing Jeff Bell, but we do so many shows together, we talk so much.
Yeah.
But there is kind of this like fallacy that like when a player has a breakout year, people just say, well, that's it. That was the breakout. That's a
That was
cap.
it.
He
Yep.
can't possibly do better than that. And I feel like Khalil Shakir is getting that treatment this year. Yeah, Rashad Bateman, 25 years old. And something that is rarely talked about with Bateman is the contingent upside. That like right
Yep.
now, the big talk is, it's a low volume offense, a lot of mouths to feed. What happens if Zay Flowers, God forbid, is to miss some time? Then
Right.
Rashad Bateman is the wide receiver 1 on this team. We're looking at a first-round pick who was just heavily paid, has increased his yardage in 3 straight seasons. Like you say, an ascending player. I think that's a good pick there. I was happy you threw him in the queue, because if you didn't, I would have.
Nice. And he had a couple of touchdowns in the playoffs too, which is always kind of a nice like last taste. Last time we saw him, he was scoring touchdowns.
Yeah,
Let me
I
see
do
if there's
think he's
anyone else.
a better in best ball play for sure, because
Mhm.
you can't always predict when he's going to have the 60-yard touchdown. But
Right.
like you said, the contingent upside, if Zay Flowers is to miss some time, he moves way up and he's in flex consideration for us. And then once you get to buys and injuries in the midway point in the season, sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and put those boomer bust players in your lineup.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I'm going to start scrolling through, see if it's pretty picked over at this point.
It is, yeah, and the quarterbacks, there's still quarterbacks available that, I'd feel okay with taking a QB2, but I never feel like I need to force a QB2 in this sort of
Right.
format. Like, it is so deep this year, especially with people needing kickers and defenses, and then once injuries start rolling around in the midway point of the season, I mean, this is a league where you can just get guys off of the waivers. Like, I'm
Yeah.
sure Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Jackson Dart, 2 weeks
Right.
before you start hearing Jackson Dart is probably going to start, you pick him up and stash him on your bench, and you're looking at potential QB1 down the stretch. There's just so many different ways that quarterbacks can break this year that it's the position I refuse to let myself stress over in the draft.
I'm gonna put a guy in here who I like.
Although in hindsight, I definitely do like Justin Herbert, but having Tucker Kraft and having Matthew Golden, this team would
Yeah, that was that. It would have been nice. He was one where if he was there, I would have liked to double up there. Would have been nice to get him and Herbert.
And there goes
But
Ali
yeah,
Gordon in round 13. So moving
yeah.
way up the board there. And you also talk about it, Achan losing out on goal line work. Jalen Wright is not known for his goal line work. He is much like Achan, another speedster, where Ali Gordon coming in here, 225 pounds. He definitely profiles to take that. And just 2 years ago, we saw Raheem Mostert, 21 touchdowns, I believe, in the offense.
Yep. Yeah, 18, 21, something like that. Huge number. Let's see.
Yeah, a lot of these guys, like we just saw Will Shipley go off the board as well in round 13. That was another guy that was consistently around 16, 17, 18. As we start getting more camp clarity, these middle to late rounds start getting pretty gross pretty quick.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was talking about a little bit, where it has changed my running back strategy a little bit because the guys you could get super late aren't there anymore.
I'd almost be okay. We got a couple running backs in the queue here, going running back. And then what do you even think about maybe now that those super late round edges are gone? What do you think about maybe paying up for defense and a kicker a little bit, and then
Yeah,
just knowing that you could
I
still
like
get
that.
those guys later, and then give yourself a little bit of edge in those spots?
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I think after these next kind of few guys, there's not a whole lot of guys I'm excited about.
Right.
I might add a couple more to the queue that are kind of on my list here.
And that, like, definitely, if you're in a 14 round home league draft, would not advise paying up for a kicker or defense. But here, when like the entire player pool is kind of picked clean by round 15, I think it's okay to do that in this round, knowing that those last guys you pick, just complete lotto tickets, and more likely than not, probably getting cut for somebody off of waivers after week 1 anyway.
Right.
But yeah, a few names that are jumping out to me. The guy that's sitting atop our list right now would be really happy if he makes it back to us. He's a guy that I've been drafting pretty aggressively this offseason, and frankly, still shocked to see on the board after some of the drumbeat that we've heard on him for the last couple of weeks. But yeah,
Don't jinx
handful of
us.
guys that I still like here. I know, not saying the name, but looking.
Let's see.
I
Yeah, I'm
wonder.
trying to kind of stroll. I'm talking and kind of strolling through. Yeah, the weird thing here is it does, and again, I've been probably a little bit more in the best ball stuff where some of the high floor, low ceiling wide receivers who are just kind of like the PPR guys who can get you 10, 15 points. They just aren't attractive in this format
Right.
because you're never going to want them in your lineup, or the guys who could pop for a couple of long touchdowns, like, but you don't want to start them in your lineup. So it does make the board feel a little less attractive. I have noticed, like, man, the tight ends are falling. There's some good tight ends still left, which slightly
Makes us
surprising in
regret
this format.
paying up for Kraft maybe as a tight end too, knowing
Maybe.
that
I
we'd
mean,
be
I
able to
don't know
get
if
like
there
a.
were. I'm trying to think. I'm not sure. Well, yeah, maybe Keenan Allen there in hindsight, but
Yeah, there's a few names that I'm still surprised to see that I would have expected to see off the board by now. I mean, Dallas Goedert, first of all, been
yeah,
getting good reviews too, like out of camp,
right,
saying that he's
yeah,
set up for a career year, that he's looking better than ever. Especially as AJ Brown has missed almost the entire last month of practice. Just Dallas Goedert is kind of taking over there. Kind of surprised to see him. I don't think I've seen Dallas Goedert fall this far in a single draft this year.
right.
All right, so Brashard Smith still going off the board. Did show a little bit of flash in that preseason game, but
Yeah, I don't hate it at
I,
this point in the
yeah,
draft, but yeah, he was one of
I've
those
cooled off
guys
a bit.
who I wish a whole lot of my Brashard Smith shares were Ja'Cory Krosky-Maris shares in hindsight.
Right.
Like I got a decent amount. All right, yeah, our guy's still there.
All right, so Kyle Monunga is the easy pick here, right?
Yep.
And I feel like I've been pounding the table, and I'm gonna have egg all over my face if I'm wrong on this one, but I've been pounding the table for Monunga over Roshan Johnson for the last 2 months
Yeah.
now. And it's weird, we got this Courtney Cronin. Well, here, let's make this next pick, and then we can go. The
About a quarterback here because we still have like 5 or 6 teams with only one. A guy just took his third. Do we want to, or do we want to go one of these wide receivers or running backs?
I like the running back atop the queue, but I also like the quarterback that's sitting right there. That's a nice stacking option for us with a very, very high ceiling. I'm okay with
Yeah,
either of those. You can make the choice.
let's roll the dice on the quarterback so we have some optionality and some bye
So
week stuff. And
would you rather go Penix or McCarthy? Because they're both stacking options. You sold me on Penix in this format. I'm happy with either of them.
yeah, let's go Penix. I like them both,
Cool.
but yeah, let's go Penix.
Not getting the best reports on JJ McCarthy. We talked about this a little
Yeah,
bit.
it's been
It's
kind
kind of
of
back
up or
and
down.
forth. Yeah,
Yeah, it
yeah.
is back and forth. He was one of those where I went back and watched the preseason game. I thought he looked pretty good, but then he had one just terrible miss on a
Mhm.
guy like wide open down the seam. Which to be fair, is there have been kind of similar reports on Penix on that too, where he just makes some awesome
Right.
throws and then he'll occasionally miss an easy one. But yeah, Penix is one of my favorite guys this year. He might end up being my most drafted guy in best ball. And part of that is more of a structural thing where I just like
Paying up for London, right?
well, part of it's like the
Moody.
receiver, and then part of it is I like getting that second or third quarterback pretty early, and I'm generally waiting. So he kind of fits my build there, and it's a different format than these where you actually would have to start him, where you can get those big weeks and not have to deal with the ups and downs. He's a guy who maybe makes a little bit more sense in best ball, but he's one of those guys I'm just buying into the hype a little bit. Like when
Yeah.
you hear like the guys around him talk about like, oh, this guy, like we're gonna, he's like, we can be the best offense in the league, and their guys are talking about we can go to the Super Bowl. Like you obviously take all that with a huge grain of salt, but it's way better to hear that than just to hear like, oh, he's shown a lot of improvement, or you know what I mean? Kind of those like
Right.
compliments that aren't actually compliments. They're just like you're searching for something nice to say.
Yep.
I always get a little like scared when people when they ask about a player and it's like all the focus is on how much he's improving and that kind of stuff, because it's just like
Best
when I
shape
was
of his
coaching,
life.
Yeah. Like when I was coaching youth soccer, and you'd have a guy who's like really struggling. You're like, oh, he's getting so much better. It's just kind of like your default, he's kind
Showing
of staring
improvements
off into
every
space
day.
sometimes. Like I don't think this is his thing, but it's like he's come so far. And
So we had,
I know this is a different, obviously way different level, but when you hear some of those coach comments, you start kind of replaying some of the things you've said in your head, and you're like, all right, I'm not gonna like look at this like he's so improved as like a compliment, because it's almost just saying like, his understanding's coming a long way. He still has ways to go, like that kind of stuff. When you hear it, kind of scares me a little bit.
good plug for the show I'm doing later this week with our friend Greg Branos of the Coach Speak Index. He has actually categorized all this to know, what we should be paying attention to and what we shouldn't do. And really good work out there. Dallas Goddard, my goodness, end around
It's such great
15.
value. Yeah, like
I'm kind of
I
mad
really
that we
get that
took
one.
2 tight ends because that would
Yeah,
have been like a great pick, but yeah, kind of weird to see that. And I think that's kind of where everybody is at. I mean, I'm sure team 1 sitting here with, oh, well, they took Trey McBride early. I was scrolled down a little bit. Now we're starting to see a lot of people might be having the same mindset as us, like, hey, board is pick clean. Let's just go start taking some defenses now.
and this is one area where like I feel like I'm behind the 8 ball in terms of like I just don't play many leagues that have defenses. I'm in
Right.
Dynasty, I'm in Best Ball, so I feel like a little bit fish out of water here. I'm gonna check the Football Guys rankings real quick and see
I think
who.
that's probably the best thing, and I'll just filibuster while you are talking about that a little bit.
I mean,
Um,
I'll scroll in. I can probably do both. Let's see who we have as our best defenses.
But yeah, there were a lot of these muddied RB2 situations that we're starting to get some clarity on now. Where Blake Corum, we took Kyle Monangai, Blake Corum obviously going off the board, Taj Brooks going off the board. And these were guys that were all around 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, just you could get at the very end of your draft, and not
Exactly.
anymore. I mean, you start looking at the available running backs at this point, and we're all looking at guys that are either currently dealing with injuries or multiple injuries away from actually having a role.
Right. And like I did the live draft for the Football Guys Bowl in went up to Columbus. My son actually drafted the team,
Awesome.
and I was shocked. Kyle Monangai went in the 12th round in that. It's just like some of these like guys who you feel like you can wait on are just rocking up boards. So I mean,
There's those players that like we watch a lot of football and we kind of have that like natural knack for like who's good and who's not. But there's always the players that I like that like you don't need to be a scout. You don't need to like live and breathe football that like a casual fan can watch and like
mhm.
kind of be like, "Ooh, wow." And my wife, I was watching the Bears first preseason game against Miami and she comes walking downstairs and Common Unguy's first carry, he's just like dropping his head and just running through defenders and she goes, "Who's that guy? Like he's really good. I
Yeah,
want him on my fantasy team." And it's like when you can be good enough that you are impressing just like casual fans, that's always something that kind of piques my interest a little bit. And he just has that running style that you're just like, he just plays with some tenacity that a lot of football players don't have.
yeah,
All right, so looking at these next picks coming up, I see through
and
a few defenses in there.
yeah. I
I
just
do
went
like some
straight
of,
down the Football Guys rankings, so
yeah,
hopefully, I don't know
why
if you
not?
have a strong opinion on any of these guys.
Not at all. I think there's a handful of skill players that we have in the queue right now. Probably take one of those with
Yep.
the round 16 pick, and then come back in 17 with one of those defenses because Team 12 already took a defense, so wouldn't expect them to take another defense and a
It,
kicker. Yeah, paying up for
right.
Brandon Aubrey there.
I watched some of the Bears preseason game on the local broadcast. I saw an interview with their director of player personnel,
Kevin
and
Warren?
no,
No,
it
no, no. Never
was
mind. He's the president.
his
Yeah.
name was like Bill
All
Allen
right.
or something. I
All
think he's
right.
a former tight end, really tall guy. He said he'd been there like 10 years, and the reporter had asked him, who's a name I need to know from this rookie class, and he was just like, Kyle Monangai is going to be like a big part of what we do. He's going to see the field, that kind of stuff, and was really excited about him. I kind of like when the GMs or the GMs or like high level front office people show up on the local broadcast for these preseason games, because
Yeah.
they'll sometimes drop some nice little tidbits on there. And that one may have been a little bit of confirmation bias because Monangai is one of the guys I've just been
Well,
drafting a ton of, but it was nice to hear it.
well, I think the thing with Monangai too. Well, we're on the clock right now. What do you think about the running back that I threw in the queue? You think it's too early for him? Because he seems like the last injury away guy that's still out there.
Yeah, I like it. I heard he looked good in the game. I didn't see the preseason game. Did you see much of it?
I did, yeah. Or no, I didn't watch the Saints one at all. But he's
Okay.
one of those
I
guys
had
that's
heard
so
just like
young.
some people kind of on Twitter saying like he looked really good. I hadn't gone back and watched it. I've just been swamped with a couple other things, but that's one of those where you kind of want to get a view of it. We've seen enough of him to know he's pretty good,
I mean,
but
I would say I
nice
loved
to
what I
hear.
saw last year in the very limited taste that we saw, and did a show with Matt Waldman not too long ago where he made a comp that really surprised me on Kendry Miller, saying that he sees him move the way OJ Simpson moved on a football field, where he does these kind
Hmm.
of like weird, awkward, herky jerky movements that like he shouldn't be able to get away with, but he does.
Yeah.
I'm fine with the Buffalo Bills here. I think that's
Yeah,
the
that's it.
obvious one, right? Cool.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, back to Monungai. What I want to say real quickly. I know we've kind of like we keep dancing around the Monungai, but there was a report. It was ESPN. ESPN's Courtney Cronin came out a couple of weeks ago and just kind of like no quotes. I think it was just like a vibe thing, maybe because he's the veteran there. But she had a quote in her article saying that Roshan Johnson has the inside track to being the
I saw
RB2
that.
there, and everybody just ran with it. But when you hear Ben Johnson, when you hear Declan Doyle, when you hear Eric Bieniemy, they are all raving about Kyle Monungai. So I think this like it was on ESPN, one of the biggest sports
Right.
networks on the planet. And I think that people just kind of ran with that quote. But if you're paying attention to what's coming out of the coaches' mouths, out of the player coaches, offensive coordinator, like you said, the director of player personnel, like they are all gushing about Kyle Monungai. And yeah, Ben Johnson, the head coach, saying this is a guy who's already earned the trust of all of us, and we think that we're going to be able
Right.
to lean on him late in the season this fall. Like, why is Roshan Johnson still getting drafted ahead of him? I don't get it.
Yeah, I'm the same way, and I think a lot of it was that report, and then maybe some. I do think there is something to some of the the stats about seventh round running backs and stuff. But
Of course, yeah.
my big thing, even as like an analytics, someone who does believe in some of the stats and analytics, is you have to update your priors in terms of like, okay, there's X number of running backs who are taken in the seventh round. Well, like how many of those were already running with the second team, like third week of camp? Because
Hmm.
it's not this giant basket. The basket's really shrunk down now. And now all of a sudden, maybe there's 10 guys in there and 3 of them were good. You know what I mean? We're
Right.
like, it's of the 100 guys who are in the seventh round, not all of them are, you know, getting that kind of buzz. I'm going to add one more guy here that made me
Well,
think of something.
you also have to
Not,
look
not
at
for this round.
every draft class through like its own lens. And it's kind of funny, I had this conversation with Sigmund Bloom. He was on the show not too long ago, and I was talking about tight ends drafted inside the top 15. And you look at
Mhm.
that list: Jeremy Shockey, Kyle Pitts, all guys, like every single one of them has turned in a top 6 tight end season. And that was my very bullish case for Tyler Warren and Colson Loveland. And Sig was like, maybe pump the brakes a little bit. He's like, this is such a weak class up top that maybe we should be looking at top 15 draft capital as like top 35 or top 45 draft capital when comparing to other classes. I'm like, okay, that's fair. But in the same aspect, when you're looking at the running backs, because of how deep this running back class is, a round 7 running back in this class might be like a round 4 running back in another draft class. Like we heard this going into the draft that there were so many good running backs that typically we see this big run in like round 4, round 5, round 6. And it seemed like everybody was just willing to wait until round 6 and 7 to get these running backs, because you heard it from a lot of different GMs and executives saying, like, when we got into day 3, there were 12 guys that we had on our board that we would have been happy with. And, you never want to be that guy that starts the run. So it seemed like everybody was just okay waiting until round 7. And that's where we get Taj Brooks and Ja'Cory Krosky Marriott and Kyle Monungai and these guys that are immediately carving out roles in training camp.
Yeah. And I when we were talking about the preseason interviews, I saw one with the Bengals GM, and he said that exact thing where he's just like, and speaking specifically of Taj Brooks and taking him in the 6th round, he was just like, we knew coming in he wasn't like a typical 6th round running back. He was there because of this class. So
Yep.
we had higher expectations of him than like the draft capital.
Mhm.
And that was nice because we had been kind of saying that, ourselves. And it's nice to hear that from an NFL person saying, like, yeah, that is actually how we viewed this running back class. We all knew that there were enough of those guys. And these teams all had, these boards where they didn't feel like they had to panic and like, oh, there's only 3 running backs left. There's like, oh, there's 8 of them. And, I bet teams like the Bengals probably liked Monangai and they liked some of these other late round guys. And that let them wait because they probably had Brooks and Monangai and Brashard Smith and Jaden Blue and all these guys kind of in a tier. And they knew that 1 or 2 of those guys in that tier would still be there. So they didn't feel like they had to rush out and grab them.
Yeah, and that's something that you see happen in fantasy drafts. It's kind of fun that GMs, like guys running NFL teams, are kind of playing the same game as us, where it's like, hey, don't be the guy that reaches for a tier. Just let the tier fall to you. It's kind of funny that we see NFL GMs operating the same way here. So we need a kicker as well. And Dan, the way this would shake out, we'd be the second to last pick. So again, kickers, I don't put in the work to study.
Okay, I'm looking at here. I'll put
Adam Harstad. Adam Harstad is who I defer to when it comes to kickers. So I don't know if you want to throw some kickers in there, but I'm thinking
I will. Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. So
cool. Yeah, we're starting to see some of the big names go off the board, of course. I mean, but yeah, I mean, shout out Adam Hutchison. Every single one of these streams that I've done so far, I've shouted out Sigmund Bloom and Adam Hutchison for their Rent a Defense and their Rent a Kicker articles. And
Adam Harstad.
Did I say Adam Hutchison?
Yeah.
Yes, Adam Harstad.
Shout out him too. He's been great with all the injury news too. He's been
seriously. How lucky are we to have?
I know we have all these big resources to use. It's great.
And like the conversation that happens behind the scenes that people don't get access to, like, if something happened and like, I wasn't working at Football Guys, I'd have to work something out with Joe. Like, do not kick me out of base camp because that is the best high level football conversation I've ever been a part of. And it's really cool to see like how the sausage is made over at Football Guys. But yeah, Adam Harstad, Rent a Kicker. And it's a really good article too, because like if you're just punting on kicker, you don't have to stream a kicker every single week. Follow Adam's article for the first 3 or 4 weeks, and more likely than not, you're going to stumble across a guy that becomes a plug and play guy. So I think that's the fear is people are like, I don't want to have to deal with streaming a kicker and a defense for 17 weeks. Well, you don't have to. You do it for the first few weeks, and then more often than not, you fall into a guy. Same thing last year. Like if you were streaming quarterbacks, by week 2 or 3, you said, oh, Baker Mayfield is good enough that I could just plug him in my quarterback spot and not have to worry about it. And I think that's kind of the same premise here. So
I think we can wait on kicker till the next round. So I don't know. Either of those top 2 guys I like. One would be a stack. The other guy's getting a little bit of buzz.
Yeah, I kind of am interested in this stacking option.
Okay. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
that would be top of mind too.
Keandre Lambert.
And the other guy might be there for our last pick too, if we want to. Go that route.
I'm sure he'll still be there.
You want to go kicker? Let's go kicker here, so we get one of the top.
Let's go with the Lions, right?
Yeah, that
seems to be the best one. A lot of indoor games. We like that. Let's go with
Detroit Lions kicker. We have Jake Bates, the Lions kicker, as number 3 kicker. So
awesome. Well, I will trust Adam on that one. Feel good about that. Chigakonkwo falling into round 19. What do you make of that? Because he was a guy going way earlier than that. Plays 100% of the snaps, playing almost exclusively out of the slot. And now we see him falling in drafts. Like Cam Ward.
I think it's just the difference between these non-best ball ones. I mean, Isaiah Likely in the 18th or 17th, 18th turn there. Yeah. I mean, I like Likely too as another guy. But again, I think some of these teams, the teams that didn't take, or the teams that took a lot of teams that didn't take, stumbling on my words here. So like the Trey McBride team didn't take a backup.
Right.
The David Njoku team didn't take a backup. The Mark Andrews team, the George Kittle team. Actually, the George Kittle team did, but we have 3.
Colson Loveland doesn't even have a backup.
They get
never mind. Theo Johnson, yeah.
But yeah, there's a few teams in there that just didn't take a backup, so that's going to push some of these tight end 2s down the board a little bit. But yeah, I'm pretty encouraged with Okonkwo. He's been on the field at least, and I think, again, for what he is, it's one of those guys who you put in a committee, especially on best ball. And in these regular drafts that are 20 rounds, I think he's a great backup tight end, especially if you get like a Kittle or a Laporta or somebody who you feel really solid about, or Hawkinson even. You have a bye week guy who you feel really good about.
Well, Dan, I think we might have been the last person to get round 8 Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. Just flipped over to Twitter just to see if I missed out on any big news. And first drive, he punched in a 28-yard rushing touchdown. So wheels up. People are going to be going
Yeah.
crazy for Lil Bill here over the next few weeks. So
Yeah, I think that was, and the guy behind us going double running back. I feel like that was probably smart. That was a good call by you to not take Hawkinson
yeah,
until the next round.
yeah. So
Yeah,
feeling good about the way that we'll see. I mean, I'm really interested to see because we see this all the time, right? Where these rookies get a little bit of buzz in the preseason, and then everyone just gets way over their skis. I mean, this
yeah,
guy I was just picking up off dynasty waiver wires like a week ago,
yeah.
and now here we
Yeah.
are in a high stakes league, taking him in round 8. Everybody on Twitter is buzzing about him. We'll see if he could actually be one of the few that lives up to the hype.
And then our guy, we can talk about Phil Maffa was another guy who I had on there for just
Yeah.
a round 20th guy, just because he's been getting a little bit of buzz, and it's one of those situations where there's no like incumbent or no like there's no hill that's impossible to climb there, where it could be any of those guys, because I don't think any of them are doing anything real impressive. I do wonder if that maybe
Longest
Brian
tenured guy there
Robinson
is
or
Deuce Vaughn, I believe, is the longest tenured
Yeah.
running back in Dallas.
Yeah,
I do,
there's
yeah.
just not much there, and it doesn't sound like Miles Sanders or Javonte Williams are, lighting anything on fire. Where that's a job that can be taken.
And even Jaden Blue, it sounds like very one-dimensional. They want to use him out in wide zone runs and in the passing game, but he's not the guy that can take the early down work or the goal line work.
Right.
And that's the one thing. Like I have just been dying for a running back trade because we get them every single preseason, and it hasn't
Yeah.
happened this year. And we're hearing smoke about Brees Hall and Travis Etienne and Brian Robinson, and we've got these little moves. Like all it took was a Brian Robinson trade rumor for
Right.
Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt
go
to
like
shoot this high
6
up the
rounds
grab.
earlier.
Right.
Yeah.
So like if like let's say Brees Hall, gets traded to the Chiefs, just completely pulling this
Right.
out of thin air. Like,
Yeah.
how does that affect Pacheco? How does that affect Hall? How does that affect Braylon Allen? How does that affect Isaiah Davis? Like, I'm just dying for an actual trade to happen, or Terry
Yeah, for
McLaurin
sure.
requesting a trade. Like, I need a big trade so we can make some moves here because it has just been a lot of speculation over the last few weeks.
Yeah, it has. It's been an interesting preseason because there haven't been any injuries that have like really, really changed things. There are guys who are kind of
Missing a
slow
couple
coming
weeks.
back, or it's like, oh, Chris Godwin's a little bit further behind than we thought, so he's fallen a little bit. Or guys who may end up on PUP, but there hasn't been a season-ending injury where it caused other guys to really rise. I mean, maybe Pearsall a little bit with Ayuk, but very little of that. Where in some past seasons, there's been just guys who rock it up because of somebody will have a season-ending injury or whatever.
I'm trying. Was it like JJ McCarthy last year? I want to say that was like day 2 of training camp or something like that.
Yeah, that happened early.
We always see these like big and knock on wood, we want health, but yeah, that's another like injuries really change ADP and player values and stuff like that. And it's been outside of these tiny little, pick something up, going to miss a few games or, miss a few days of practice, miss a couple of weeks or whatever. We've avoided the big injuries. I think the biggest one so far has probably been Isaiah Likely, who they're saying might even be back by week
He's
1.
gonna be back by like 2 or 3. That shouldn't.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's been pretty calm, which is
so,
good. As someone who's drafted a lot of early teams.
Yeah.
That is
the one
like
injuries.
The one thing you fear is like,
When did you start drafting this year, Dan?
Like the day after the draft. I got
Right.
I fired some off early, and then I kind of took some breaks, and then so I've been kind of drafting on and off. I have probably, I'd say maybe I want to maybe draft 25% of my teams these last 2 weeks or so.
Yeah.
Where like last
good time.
Last year, I feel like I waited. I maybe drafted almost half my teams the last 2 or 3 weeks. And part of it was just, I got bored and drafting. I wanted to save some teams. But yeah, I'm getting close to maxing out some of these contests already.
Nice. Yeah, I think I did about 25% of my drafts since Friday afternoon when I dropped my wife off at the airport.
Yeah.
It's been out of town all weekend, so I was just being a degenerate, just ripping best ball drafts nonstop all weekend. But this year I did. Yeah, I was just my first draft this year was June, and it was kind of nice not doing like the super early season. I feel like I'm not anchored down to like bad takes that I had from the spring.
Right.
Kind of looking at it with a fresh slate in June was nice. But let's talk through this pick real quick. I like all 4 of these guys in the queue. I'll let you pick whichever one you want.
Um, well, I guess one would be a stack. That guy stands out to me, or the
You
guy
can
at the
name
top of
them
the
all.
list.
We're
I
not
think his
trying to
name.
hide our
Yeah,
cards at
either
this point.
Cavante Turpin or Ray McLeod. I think Ray McLeod would be more of like an injury guy. Cavante Turpin
I think
would be a
Turpin just
guy
has the
who.
standalone upside.
Yeah, I think I like that one because
Me too.
we were just talking about Phil Maffa and how
Yep.
none of these running backs have really taken the bull by the horns. Maybe the answer to that is he's their third down back, and they just kind of let Javonte Williams plug away. And if Jaden Blue's not ready, maybe Turpin takes some of that stuff that Jaden Blue was ticketed for.
Kind of upset to see Olamide Zaccheaus go undrafted in this one. That would have been a nice for the brand pick. Was feeling
Yeah,
good about
I know you're
what I
high on
dug
him.
up in Bears camp over the last week. But happy with the way this one turned out. Let's go ahead and run through the draft real quickly one more time before we sign off here. So started off with Drake London, then with Chase Brown in round 2. On the third round reversal, we came back with Jackson Smith and Najigba. That was one where we did have a little bit of dissension there. We were looking at Omarion Hampton, looking at T. Higgins as well. We'll see how this one plays out. Trevion Henderson in round 4 felt like an absolute steal. Jameson Williams in round 5. That was another value that I felt really good about. Isaiah Pacheco starting to creep up a little bit in drafts, but still getting him at the end of 6th round. Feel good there. Matthew Golden paid up for Ja'Cory Cross-Marriott in round 8, but we have a pretty strong running back room that I was okay taking that risk because we aren't relying on him. He's a bench stash at this point. TJ Hawkinson and Tucker Kraft in rounds 9 and 11 with Braylon Allen sandwiched in between there. Justin Herbert in round 12, Rashad Bateman in round 13, then Kyle Monungai. We took Michael Penix as our QB2 in round 15, Kendre Miller, Buffalo Bills defense, Keandre Lambert-Smith to stack with Justin Herbert, Detroit Lions kicker, and then Cavante Turpin in round 20. I always try to find like the sliding doors moments in these drafts where it's like, had we done this, we could have done this, maybe we should have done this instead. I think the only thing in hindsight that I may have changed is not drafting Tucker Kraft because of the tight end value that fell. But then I'm looking at the other players that went in that range, and I don't know who I'd have really preferred over Tucker Kraft. I mean,
That's the thing. I think
maybe
part of
Rashad
the
White, Ray Davis.
yeah, or like Keenan Allen. We were talking about
Yeah,
Keenan
yeah.
Allen would have been fine. But I don't think Keenan Allen's necessarily going to be a guy where we're just like, oh, we needed to have him.
If Tucker
So
Kraft's averaging 12, 15 points per game, we're not going to care that we paid up for
yeah,
him.
exactly.
It's not the end of the world there. So, I mean, I think the thing that sours that pick a little bit is seeing that we could have got like Chigakonkwo in round 18.
Right,
Like that would have been nice. Round 18 Chigakonkwo might like him a little bit better than a round 11 Tucker Kraft. But if that's the worst thing that we did was
right.
draft Tucker Kraft in round 11, feel pretty good about this one.
Feel great about it. Yeah, I feel like that Isaiah Pacheco pick. I really like that in terms of getting a running back 3 with that much upside in the 6th round. He was a guy who I wasn't really expecting to make it there, even though
Yeah.
his ADP is still kind of in that 68 to 70 range. I was expecting him to go off the board earlier. And then same with Trevion Henderson. We talked about, we kind of glossed over this during the draft, but he's moved up to 41 in the ADP in this. And usually when the guy's ADP is moved up that much, they're more likely to go early than slide because, they're on that kind of like ascending plane. So I was definitely pleasantly surprised that he made it to us there. I think Alvin Kamara is probably a safer pick in terms of just projected volume and everything, but just for the fun and the upside of Henderson, I think is really appealing. He's a guy who could lead all running backs in receptions this year. That wouldn't surprise me. So, I mean,
And
he
as
could
much as I
be like a Devon Achane basically in that
right.
offense.
And as much as like I don't want to hedge, but Alvin Kamara, it's just like I'm almost getting like click
I've got a
fatigue.
lot.
Like I have
Yeah.
drafted so much Alvin Kamara that's kind of nice to mix in,
Yeah.
who could just end up being kind of a younger Alvin Kamara. So
Yeah.
really happy
Exactly.
with the way this one turned out, Dan. Like I said, we could nitpick little things here and there, but like for the minor little picks that we aren't crazy about, I think we made up for with some really good value picks. I mean, that spending a 2nd, 4th, and 6th on running backs and getting Chase Brown, Trevion Henderson, and Isaiah Pacheco feels like we could potentially have 3 RB1s right there. So really happy with the way this one turned out. Dan, as always, thanks for the time. I don't know. I owe you a beer or something when we get to Vegas because I've been
This has
taking a
been
lot
awesome.
of your time this off season with the training camp reports that we're doing and the multiple live streams, and then just the random like, hey, I got a hunch on this player and bouncing it off you. So appreciate all the talking that we've had this off season, and season's gonna be here before you know it, man. Just a little over 2 weeks left before this one kicks off. So we'll keep a close eye on this one. Maybe revisit it at some point later this season. But I want to thank everybody who took the time for tuning in. I will be back next week. Don't have a guest booked yet, but I've got somebody penciled in that would be a really, really fun guest. So, as always, tune in Mondays at 8 p.m. Eastern right here on Football Guys YouTube channel or on the Football Guys Twitter page. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.